Man, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of EOS. It's 1090 Jake, man. I'm rocking with y'all, and y'all rocking with me. And for this video, we're gonna be speaking on a 2-year-old little boy that found his father's gun inside of a Paw Patrol backpack, pulled it out, and shot his own mother in the back of the head while she was on a conference call on Zoom. August 11th, 2021. A Seminole County detective in Florida responded to 486 Spanish Trace Drive in reference to a dead woman with a possible gunshot to the head. Arriving on scene, the detective was given a brief report by on-scene patrol officers stating they'd received a 911 call for a woman that was on a Zoom video conference call. She was on her desktop computer when she was seen falling backwards and off screen. Co-workers on Zoom would call 911 when it became evident she wasn't going to respond and wasn't getting up. The call went out for a welfare check, and when officers arrived, they found a male performing CPR on the woman. He identified her as 21-year-old Shamaya Lynn, and she was pronounced dead shortly after. Viandre Avery identified himself as her 22-year-old boyfriend. Their children, an 11-month-old and a 2-year-old, were also present within the home. As the detective walked through the 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, second-floor apartment, he noticed no signs of forced entry, and other than the room where the body laid, the apartment showed no signs of struggle. One bedroom had 2 twin beds with baby shock sheets, while the other was shared by Shamaya and Viandre. She laid on the ground as the detective noticed the computer monitor was damaged, along with a bloody handgun on the nightstand and multiple firearms in plain view within the closet. One of the responding officers notified the detective when he'd first arrived on scene, he cleared the bloody handgun which ejected a spent shell casing. So someone had obviously fired the gun into the back of Shamaya's head, the bullet traveling through skull, brain, and exiting her head as it struck the computer monitor. A GSI test, short for gunshot residue, was performed on Viandre to test if he had any traces of evidence on him that would identify him as the shooter. Other detectives on scene would attempt to contact witnesses, but none could be located as Viandre was transported to the local police department for an interview. He said everything was normal between him and Shamaya. She'd ordered him a lift to his chiropractor appointment and another ride back home. When he arrived, his 2-year-old son Viandre Jr. was at the door and told him that his head hurt. He noticed his son had a bump on it. He then walked to their bedroom to ask Shamaya what had happened when he noticed her slumped over in the computer chair. He tried speaking with her, but she was unresponsive as he noticed the excessive amount of blood on her face and head. He immediately called 911 with their phone as dispatchers instructed him on how to perform CPR. Viandre told detectives he noticed his Glock 43 9mm handgun laying on the bed on top of the sheets. He picked it up, moving it to the nightstand and away from his 2-year-old son's reach. That's when he took a closer look at the computer screen and pulled out the bullet that was lodged in it, handing it over to the first responding police officer. He stated that he owned all 4 firearms, all of which were kept within the apartment. He confirmed he owned the Glock 43 that was found with blood on it, and he doesn't lock up any of his weapons. He keeps them fully loaded with the round in the chamber, and further stated he usually kept a Glock 43 inside of his Paw Patrol backpack next to his bed. Detectives asked if his 2-year-old son had any experience with firearms, to which Viandre said he likes pulling the trigger on cap guns and toy guns, even knowing how they work. That's when Viandre told detectives he thinks his 2-year-old boy Viandre Jr. fired the shot that killed Shamaya. He thinks the bump on his head was from the weapon's recoil, sending the weapon back as it was fired and striking the boy in the head. Detectives noted Viandre was visibly upset throughout the entire interview, especially after they notified him his girlfriend had passed. Viandre then left his contact information before leaving the police department. A Child Protective Service investigator responded on scene, and the 2-year-old boy was transported for a medical examination. They discovered swelling and bruising on the boy's forehead, along with 3 lacerations, 2 of which were parallel to one another. The markings left on the boy's forehead were consistent with the slide of a Glock 43, which is believed to have been used, meaning his injuries were from the impact of the firearm as the recoil caused the weapon to strike his head after being fired. Child Protective Services attempted an interview with the boy, but due to him being only 2 years old and his language not fully developed, he ended up just falling asleep on his grandmother's lap. One of the detectives assigned to the case met with one of the women present on the Zoom call. She'd tell the detective 3 of them were present for the company call, including Shamaya, and at some point during the interview she heard a loud noise that sounded like cans falling on the ground, followed by the cries of a child as Shamaya's head fell backwards. Her head then went forward, back into the screen, and they could see blood leaking from her face before she'd go off screen again. That's when a woman called 911, and roughly 3 to 5 minutes later, a man came into the screen stating he was calling 911. The detective met with the second woman present for the call, whose story aligned with the first. She'd witnessed the child in the background of Shamaya's camera view, guessing the boy was a 1-year-old as he jumped on the bed with nothing but a diaper on. She heard the loud noise, the boy started crying, and it appeared blood was leaking onto her nose. The male came into the room minutes later, yelling, as she tried to call out to him through the computer. She didn't think he could hear her, but he called 911. A search of the home produced 2 rifles, 2 handguns, 1 projectile, 1 shell casing, ammunition, cannabis, and the Paw Patrol backpack. 2 cell phones were also taken from the residence. Detectives met with the chiropractor Viandre had an appointment with, and the doctor confirmed when Viandre arrived and left. Shamaya's Lyft history showed when Viandre was driven to and from, proving Viandre couldn't have been home at the time of the shooting, and confirming it was the 2-year-old boy who accidentally killed his own mother. It was determined this was an obvious case of improper storage of a firearm, and it wasn't understood why an adult would place a loaded handgun in a backpack designed to appeal to children. The design of the firearm had no external safety, meaning for the weapon to be fired, all that was needed was a trigger pull, and the 2-year-old's experience with toy guns was enough for him to operate the weapon. Due to the lack of security of the firearm itself and the responsibility that falls on Viandre as a gun owner, Viandre was charged with unsafe storage of a firearm and manslaughter for the death of his own girlfriend, who'd been killed by her own son. Viandre would be arrested almost 2 months later in Orlando, Florida, and would receive a $50,000 bond shortly after. At this time, Viandre faces up to 15 years in Florida State Prison. Now this is a tough one because it clearly states he was breaking down in the interview room. He was crying, he was visibly upset. That's something that they look for, and you can tell they investigated it. Like, all right, let's really look at it like Viandre, the boyfriend, killed the girlfriend. Everything cleared his name, everything about the case, including the small details like he was actually crying in the interview room, because if you watch First 48 and shit like that, there's a lot of people that don't, or they try to play it off like they're sad, but the detectives aren't really buying it. The detectives were feeling for him in this case. And I can't imagine being 22 years old sitting in a room thinking that my 2-year-old just shot my girlfriend in the back of the fucking head, and then I walked into the room. And I know it's gonna weigh heavy on his mind and on his heart, because literally the only reason she isn't here today is because you didn't put away your gun. Why the fuck you would put a gun in a Paw Patrol bag? Why is that even yours to begin with? There's just a lot of things I don't understand. And to be honest with you, the first thing that came to my mind, he's most likely a felon. The reason I thought of that is because felons don't have proper storage of firearms. They leave them wherever they leave them. And you'll have guys that'll put their guns in baby shit thinking that it won't get searched. Like, all right, if I put my gun in the baby's bag, no one's gonna search it. If we're driving in the car and I put my gun under the car seat, no one's gonna look. And they still get caught, but it's an attempt that they go through to conceal the weapon in the hopes that it won't be found. This guy wasn't even a fucking felon. He legally owned 4 firearms. He wasn't charged as being a felon in possession of a firearm, so it just cleared that up. So there's literally no reason you didn't have a safe, you didn't have a holster, you didn't have some type of security of that gun. That gun was completely accessible, and it was weird hearing that when he walked into the room and seen his girlfriend with her shit blown out, the first thing he decided to do was grab the gun and put it on the nightstand away from his 2-year-old's reach. Had that gun been away from that 2-year-old's reach to begin with, this would have never happened. So it's very hard for me to think of a defense in this case other than asking for pure sympathy. And in that, I feel like that should really come from not the judge, but the family of the girlfriend. If they can look at it and say, you know what, we know you fucked up, but we know you loved her up until the day that she died. If they're able to resolve it like that and the judge is able to look at him like, look, you've never been in trouble before. I mean, it doesn't sound really like it's gonna happen, but if he was to get a long period of probation where he can remain free and remain in his children's life, they're most likely never gonna allow him to touch a firearm again. But sending him to prison, I don't know, because at the same time, it's very similar to drinking and driving. You didn't intend on killing anybody, but it's your irresponsibility and knowing what could happen and choosing to still go through with it that led to a person dying. And in Florida, they don't really play about DUIs, especially if somebody dies. I met a kid that was 17 and he got hit with 10 years for that same type of shit. And he was a good kid, didn't belong in prison, didn't want to be in prison, wasn't doing none of the shit we were doing in prison. He stuck to himself, he worked out, he was good inside and out. He didn't deserve to be there, and he got hit with a 10-year sentence. So in this case, I'm not sure what's gonna happen. Y'all comment in the comment section what y'all think should happen. What would you do if you had the power to decide his fate in court? But hey, it's 1090J. I'm rocking with y'all rocking with me. Till next time.